Just like that. I did it over the summer.
You guys have one more to your right usually, or no?
Actually,
That's okay.
I remember we were installing something I would have brought.
Okay, well, how's everybody doing tonight? Okay? Well, as you can see from the handout, that's what our lab is this week on installing NIC. Uninstalling and installing a NIC, actually, we're going to be doing tonight. So you have a PC at the end of your row, and here after the discussion, we'll get right into it. I did want to mention, I did email everyone a volunteer opportunity for Saturday, if you can. Had one reply so far, but it's from 9 to noon, or 9 to 2, actually. I only need a volunteer actually from 10 to 2. And basically it's to bodyguard Dester the robot as he walks around 700 high school students over in this JCSM. So if you want to hang out with the robot, and I think the students that are going to volunteer, I'm going to go ahead and train how to drive the robot. That way you can actually drive the robot, and I'll walk around with the robot and talk to students and hand out literature about our division and stuff. So more than likely I'll do that. It's not real hard to learn how to drive it. So if you are available, let me know before you leave tonight if you'd like to help, and I'll tell you where to go and all that good stuff. But if we get enough volunteers, it'll probably just be you come for an hour and you're done. If we have 3 or 4 volunteers, I think that's how it'll work. So we got one so far, so I can get a couple more. That'd be awesome. So tonight we're going to go over network hardware in our discussion. But before we do, let's go over what's due this week in week 7 hardware. Week 8 is on, next week is on remote. This week is chapter 6 for week 7 and review questions and quiz. Our lab is going to be on installing and uninstalling and installing a NIC card. If you want to go ahead and submit your name in the lab now as we speak, might be good so you won't forget, and I won't forget to remind you later. Next week's lab, looking ahead a little bit, week 8 is in step-by-step using TeamViewer remote connectivity. You'll remote in. That one actually is going to be, I believe, a take-home where you'll get started in here, but you're going to do the actual lab outside of class and connect to each other's home computers, Mac or PC, and see how that works. And then week 9 is 2 weeks from this week, is devoted to research paper on week 9. And so week 9, no face-to-face class that week. Work on your research paper and presentation. So next week, I will give you a little help with your outline to get started because we're almost midway. There is in week 9 lab. There is a lab. All it is a little tutorial to watch and answering a question on what did you accomplish for your research paper presentation. And so 2 weeks from tonight is used for beginning, if you haven't already, begin your research paper research. And if nothing else, getting your outline created and maybe starting to work on some research for that outline.
Is that the week of spring break?
No, I mean, we're not here for spring break, so we skip it in date-wise. So week 9 is actually, due date is March 15th. Due date's March 15th. So I think where spring break is a week, second week in March, if I'm not mistaken. Let me pull it up here. Is that right? Yeah. Yep. So I think we're what, March 8th or whatever?
8th to the 14th. Technically.
Yeah. Yep. So due date wise, let me see what I have the due date on that. The 15th. So let me bump that up to the next week.
So is it March 12th and 19th then we don't have class, or just the week of?
No, it's going to be the week after. Technically, week 9. Let me bump that due date up. Make sure I've got it. I think I have the wrong Sunday. It should be the 22nd. So let me see how I've got the dates on here. Hang on. Let me look at my dates here. So let me go back to my home page. I think I have it set right on the home page. what do I have for March? March 3rd, March 16th, right? We're skipping that week then. Is that right? And then March 23rd, March 30th. So I do skip the week, but I think in the actual assignment, it should be that Sunday of the 16th. So let me change that real quick here.
15th is a Sunday.
Yeah, whatever that Sunday is, I'll figure it out here.
So we're not missing 2 weeks of class, right? Just to make sure I'm understanding.
Well, you'll have spring break, which we don't have class that week.
Other than the next week.
Next week is actual the week you're devoted to research paper. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Because usually it's like week 11. I do every week, every semester it's week 11. But this semester I have something going on, so I figured, we'll do it that week. We'll do it week 9. But let me change the due date though, because I don't want you to have to be due, tell me what you did during spring break, because you're not going to do anything on spring break. So, exactly. So I changed it to the March 22nd, which is a week after spring break, is technically week 9. It is week 9. All right. Thank you for bringing that up. Cool. So that's week 9, and let me keep going here. Week 10. We've got subnet exercise going to be doing. Looks like I'm going to have to change the dates from here on out, on week 10 and on, because they're the wrong date. I think I must have thought of spring break being the 3rd instead of the 2nd week. Week 11.
So there's no
VNC?
class on March 5th and March 12th?
Correct. Well, not March 5th.
That was the 12th and the 19th.
Oh, the 12th and the 19th.
12th and 19th, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
12th is spring break, and the next week is week 9. Yep.
Nice. Wanted to hear what nobody else-
Week 11 is team using VNC. VNC was the remote control software. Week 12 is troubleshooting lab. That's a fun one. That's where you actually do back-to-back lab, where you sit with a person next to you, and you get a chance to be a troubleshooter, and you get a chance to be a user with problems. And in that lab, there is emotional problems that people have and following direction problems. So that's a fun one. We watched a little funny video to get started with that one. And then week 13 is a lab on creating users in Windows Server, Linux Server, and we're going to have you guys create users in a Mac environment as well. And in networking, you have to do this all the time, creating new users. And in Windows, we're going to be using Active Directory. In Linux, you're going to be doing it in 2 ways, in the GUI interface, and then there's a console-based interface to do a command prompt. So you'll do it both. And I'll ask you at the end, which one of you knew how to do both, second nature, which one will be quicker, the console-based or the GUI-based interface. So that's a fun one. Week 14 is actually when you begin your research paper presentation, and week 15. As far as names go or order goes with that, generally, let me pull up the tasks there for week 14. A through N on week 14. If your last name begins A through N, it's in week 14. Show up at least 10 minutes early. Make sure that you have any handouts that you are going to have. If you're going to have any handouts, let me know so I can print them out for you. And your research paper is not due until the night you give your presentation, okay? And you're going to submit it. Yes?
What if we somehow change our name, like the last name?
If you what? Change your name?
You legally change
Like
it.
legally change your name?
Yes.
Well, I guess, if you legally change it, not much I can do.
What if everyone legally changes it?
Pretty expensive, but if you want to do that. But you don't have to do that, actually. If you want to switch with somebody, you can definitely do that. So just let me know and work it out. You don't have to go spend money to change your last name. That's a good one, though. It's the first time I've had anybody say that. It's excellent. And then week 15 as well, presentations. That's our final week, our final session. And also on week 15, after we're through, we're all going to go over to the IT department, and I'm going to give you a tour of our IT department. Everything from our communication center to our voice over IP center, to all of our servers, and we'll go bust open all the cases and look at all the servers and switches in there. It's pretty cool. And they've done some changes in there. And so that'll be fun. That'll be exciting. You'll enjoy that. And that night also, I buy pizza on week 15, and you guys have to bring in snacks. No alcoholic beverages, sorry. But you can bring in, vegetables for the healthy stuff, right? And then chips, and then whatever else you want to bring. Desserts, you can bring that in. And so we'll kind of figure out on week 14 who's going to bring what. That way everybody's not bringing chips, and everybody's not bringing napkins. So we'll figure all that out. And I will change the due dates starting week 9 and on. So that's it for the rest of the semester as far as what we're going to be doing. So usually around this time I kind of wrap up and kind of see what we're doing from here on out.
So there's no final exam?
Final exam is your research paper presentation. Yep, that is your final. That is in lieu of your final exam. Yep, and you'll have a lot of fun with it. It's always informative, and not only that, but you guys get to watch each other and get to learn a lot about certain topics we don't get to cover in class, and things that you're interested in, and you can find some really interesting stuff. And so they are all recorded, and so you will have the access to all of the podcasts. You can actually watch them from last semester here for each week, 14 and 15, to kind of see what those students did last semester. And I'll replace your podcast with theirs once yours is finished. So question in the back? Yeah.
Say we present on the 14th or week 14,
Mhm.
and week 15, we're just going to get points for showing that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, that's a great question. You will still get 50 points credit for showing up on both 14 and 15 if you don't present or not, or do present or don't present. That way the people that are presenting will actually have somebody to present to as well. But, but no, I used to years ago would, make it a mandate, but now it is a 50-point credit, so it's not an option to be here. So make sure you are here if you're not presenting. And that's a great question too, by the way. All right. Now, here's one of the options, though, as far as presentation, just to kind of end the talk on presentation research paper for tonight. Options for presenting is normal, PowerPoint, Keynote. You can also use what's called Prezi, Prezi.com. Prezi.com is a presentation tool. It's pretty popular. The other tool that I emailed everybody about for the video contest that's coming up, some people are working on, that one is a good time, Powtoon.com. You can create slideshows with that. And then you could do whiteboard. You could also do video, meaning during your presentation, if you wanted to, you could actually incorporate video that you've done outside of class, like videoing a certain demo or something that you've done or somebody else has done, and bring that into your presentation as well. Now, you are limited to 10 minutes, so 10 minutes will fly by pretty quick, and so you want to make sure any videos you use are short and sweet, to the point, but very informative. And you can find good YouTube videos. The one thing I recommend if you're going to use YouTube videos is there's a plugin through Firefox, a YouTube plugin that you can download, an add-on to download YouTube videos as an MP4, as a native video on your computer. And I would recommend that because our internet probably wouldn't handle if everybody used a YouTube video during the presentation. And so, to be choppy or whatever the case may be. So I recommend that. So yeah, 10 minutes in length. And one thing I don't want you to do during the presentation is just read your research paper. So make sure your research paper is just basically highlights of your presentation is highlights that really interest you about your research in your presentation. All right. And we'll go over more on that. I actually go over that in the week 9 little video you watch to help you with your outline and stuff. But, if you want to use cue cards, you can do that. Some students like to use little 3x5 cards or whatever. You can do that if you want to, whatever makes you comfortable. But it's a lot of fun. You'll get a lot out of it, hopefully. And it's good to play the part of a teacher. You might even enjoy it. You never know. And so, but in IT, wherever you go into IT, you're always teaching somebody something generally about a system or software or hardware or something like that. And so whether it's to one person or a group of people, you'll be teaching something to somebody. And so it's a good practice for you. Okay, well, let me switch over to the presentation here. And we're going to be, again, going over hardware. And let me bring it up here because I think I closed it earlier. There it is. So we're looking at hardware, switching, and routing. And specifically, I think this ends on NIC cards, which is perfect. That's what we're going over tonight. So we're going to look at LAN connectivity hardware, things that make our network work on the LAN. The hardware connected to it. Last week, you created a Cat5 cable, straight cable, which you guys did awesome. And I was telling somebody earlier that as large a class as we have, it's actually the cleanest I've seen post-lab. So kudos to you guys. You did a great job. It's excellent. Now, granted, I did have the vacuum folks come in, and they probably wouldn't like to be called vacuum folks. But maintenance people come in and vacuum the floor on Friday, and so they did a good job. But you guys did. It was pretty clean. I did a walk around afterwards, so thank you for cleaning up after yourself. So we're going to identify different parts of LAN hardware, installing, configuring what that's all about, like NICs, hubs, bridges, and switches. Explain advanced features of switches and purposes of routing. We will not go over IP version 4 or 6 routing protocols, I believe. We're going to end on NICs, I believe, on that, as far as what NIC cards do. So anyway, connectivity devices are on our network to enable transmission. Like in your computer you're connected to as a Cat5 connection, connected to a hard NIC card, hardwired NIC card. And they transmit and receive data constantly, these devices do. It falls upon the physical and data link layer of the OSI model. It issues data signals constantly. Part of its job of the NIC is assembling and disassembling frames and interpreting physical addressing information, like physical NIC card, IP addresses, source destination, IP address, and also determine right to transmit. There are smart hardware device, NICs are, and they have prioritization built into it. So if you have lots of stuff coming in, which you generally do, and you don't even know it, hitting your NIC card constantly, it'll prioritize what things come in and when they come in. And then network management's a part of the hardware as well. Buffering, to where you can, regardless what we have gigabit NIC cards on these machines and gigabit switches, and so we can push and pull a lot of data, but still even that, you're going to need some type of buffering to make sure you get the data successfully onto your machine and out of your machine. Traffic filtering is built in as well. It does not analyze information at all. Doesn't do any rule-based analyzation of data. There's no rules around what's coming in or out. That's for another level. The importance is without NIC cards, we wouldn't be able to communicate, whether it be hard NIC cards like we're going to use tonight and play with, or wireless NIC cards, or cell phone NIC cards, laptop NIC cards, tablet NIC cards. Every device is connected to a network of any type, whether it be wired or wireless, has a NIC card. And without these, we wouldn't be able to function in a network environment. So types of NIC cards. Before you go in and begin installing a NIC, you need to know what type you have. Now, the only way to find out the type of NIC card you have is, well, there's two ways. One is to physically pull the NIC out, and it usually has on the NIC itself the type and model, make and model of it. That's one way to do it. Second way is to look at the actual motherboard manufacturer, and usually those can be found online. Most of us don't have them in a drawer somewhere. And so a lot of times when you bought the computer, it came with a manual. It didn't come with a motherboard manual, by the way. It generally just comes with a how-to manual for a Dell computer or how-to manual for whatever computer you buy, right? So if you want a motherboard documentation, you have to go to the website. But I will honestly tell you, over the years, very rarely have I done that. Most likely, I just take the NIC card out, see what size, make, and model it is, generally make it is, and try to purchase that same make of NIC. And what I mean by make, it sounds just like what it is is like if it's a 3-COM NIC card, I try to buy a 3-COM NIC card. All right, just not to say other NIC cards wouldn't work, because they probably would, but I try to keep the same flavor of NIC that's in there currently into that system. The other thing you used to come across years ago, which you really don't anymore, is they had different types of slots on NICs. Okay, you could buy different flavors of NICs that would literally have different data paths, and the data paths would basically be like this. Just to explain it, I guess, better. So here's a NIC, and it would have 2 notches in it. We'll say that's we'll just say for argument's sake here, it's a 64-bit data path. And maybe you could get a NIC card here, and it might have slots here, a slot here, and a slot here. We'll say it's like a 128-bit data path. Anyway, you could buy the motherboards would support different NIC cards. And so today, though, they're all pretty universal, and we'll actually look at some tonight when we open up these cases, a universal type of NICs that any brand will basically work. But the way I've always worked with them over the years is try to buy the same brand that's in there. Does that make sense? So Dell sometimes do use 3-COMs, but Dell's might use, I don't know, Broadcom or something, depending on what they get cheapest at time when they made that model. All right. And it doesn't say this on the slides, but I'll just mention it to you because of experience. NIC cards generally fail for 2 reasons. Power surges is generally one reason. Second reason is there's a default or a defect in the NIC card itself, some type of defect. Those are the 2 main reasons. Now, it could happen for other reasons as well. You could have a virus attack a NIC, which they are out there, very rare, but there are some out there. And malware that attacks NIC hardware, very rare. Probably not going to come across it too much, if ever. But the 2 I mentioned at first, you will come across in your lifetime as a network person working with computers. Power surges, even though they might be plugged into power supplies. I've seen that happen. And a default NIC. Oh, the third one I'll mention that actually we go over when we're doing the lab tonight is damaging that NIC when you're installing it somehow, which you can do. The one thing you don't want to do when you're installing a NIC is touch these bottom bronze gold colored
Fingers.
area here with your fingers, because if you do, you touch them with your fingers, the oil on your fingers after you plug them in can fry your motherboard and also fry the NIC card. So that's one thing you don't want to do. And generally when you buy these, they come in kind of like a cellophane type of reflective type of material. I generally just keep it in that right till I need it. Then I take it out and then put it in. They're fairly easy. You'll find out tonight if you've never installed one, fairly easy to uninstall and then install. The cases, these are old cases we're using. The new computer cases that most PCs have in your environment that you work at don't even need a screwdriver anymore to get into the case. Don't need a screwdriver to open up the NIC card and take it out. It's super easy. But let's talk more about the NIC as far as parts of the NIC and what technology is used. There are some dependencies the NIC needs. And what dependencies means is without these, it wouldn't work. Okay? It needs access method. It needs network transmission speed. It needs connector interfaces of some type. It needs a compatible motherboard to work with. It needs a manufacturer, and it needs support for enhanced features. These are some dependencies that NICs will need to work on any system, any motherboard. NICs travel upon a bus. What I drew up here, the little notches where it goes into the board, that's going to fit into the motherboard onto a bus. And a bus is basically the way to best explain it on a motherboard is kind of like you're in school and you went from here's your house, here's a school, and the bus driver went to different places to get there. Well, instead of it actually being a road, it's soldered onto the motherboard, different paths, and this is actually what's called the bus of the motherboard, okay? These soldered areas are where data flows on that motherboard. So from the NIC card to the processor of the motherboard to determine that it's connected. It has internet connection. It doesn't have internet connection, whatever. And so bus, though, is a pathway. It's a circuitry. Motherboards use a bus to transmit data to such things like memory, your processor, your hard disk, your NIC card, like we're going over tonight. So every device on your processor, on your motherboard, every device will have some bus that it's going to connect to on the motherboard. Every bus also has what's called a capacity, meaning the clock speed. You might have heard of that. And years ago, you could hack into the clock speed and do what's called overclocking to make it faster. In today's computers, really, and motherboards, you really don't have to do that much. You can, but there's really no use in doing it. I mean, it's not that you can't do it. You're just not going to gain much as you did years ago with old motherboards. They pretty much use out of the box the capacity of what that motherboard can use and be and function and speed wise is built into it. Because by the way, if you do the wrong thing and you try to overclock a motherboard, you can fry the motherboard as well.
CPU.
And the CPU you can fry as well. Whole bunch of, yeah, anything that's connected, fry it. Gone. Yes, yeah,
A lot of research.
yeah. And I've done it myself and, you know, hacking along the years, trying to figure stuff out, seeing what I can do. I've fried many motherboards. So, but today's really, you don't have to worry about it. It's pretty much out of the box. Not to say you can't, but you really don't need to. Also, the bus has what's called a path size, which is parallel bits transmitting at any given time, proportional to attached drive's speed. Say that speed of, let's say it's, I don't know, it could be a CD-ROM drive, a DVD drive, hard disk, whatever it's connected to, memory. These all have different paths, that size paths that follows across the motherboard bus. Then motherboards also have expansion slots. And each expansion slot does something, and it can fit something, whether it be a video card, whether it be a NIC card, whether it be an audio card, to where you can add in, like say for gamers, might want to buy a beefed up video card for your video monitor and your gaming to have better resolution and better speed. And some of these NIC cards are quite expensive and, you know, can, or not NIC cards, video cards are quite expensive and cost, you know, a lot of money. But, you know, if you're a gamer, you want it, you know, to be a better game experience. But expansion slots basically, and again, you'll see it in these cases when you open them tonight. Years ago, we had tons of expansion slots, tons. Not so much today on motherboards. Not to say you don't have expansion slots on desktop NIC card or desktop expansion slots on motherboards, but not as many. Basically, the expansion card, which fits an expansion slot, fits right into a certain slot on the motherboard, and those slots match these indentions here that I drew up here, ever so artistically. And so basically, like on tonight's NIC, when you uninstall it, they generally offset the slots to where it's fairly easy to determine if you have it in the right area. So they'll, instead of being like even like I have it here, it probably more than likely would be like towards the one end, you'll have a slot. So maybe like 2 slots here, right towards the end. So 2 slots right towards the end versus one in here and here. So you know where it's going to go on that path on the motherboard. So you insert the slots into an expansion slot. The card into expansion slot establishes electrical connection in those soldered points that I mentioned. The one thing you want to make sure when you're installing NIC, and we'll go over it together up here before we do it individually in a group, is you want to stand right over the top of it. No, if you're tall, doesn't matter if you're tall, short, doesn't matter. The reason I mention it is tonight you're only doing one. Each one of you are going to kind of do in your row that one computer that's on there. But imagine doing 30. Imagine doing 30, imagine doing 100. Okay, over time, it's not just a good way to install it, which it is, being right over the top of the NIC card when you're installing it, but it's going to help your back. Okay, if you're leaning over something that many times, it's going to hurt your back. It's going to hurt you physically. And so you're going to make sure that you're staying over the top of it. So you'll make sure it's right up near the front of you. You're staying over the top of it. You can view it from the top down. The other thing you want to make sure is when you're installing the NIC that you gently rock the NIC into the slot, very gently, but you want to do it firmly as well as you get down towards the bottom of the motherboard, because you don't want any of these metal tines to show. Okay, you want any of these to show. And so basically what I tell students is you want to kind of look at these pinpoints here after you install it on both sides of the NIC card to make sure that there's no metal showing on that bottom of the NIC card. Because if they are, if it's kind of offset a little bit sometimes, you might not have ruined the NIC card, but it's not going to work. And so you fire it up and it's like, doesn't work. Nothing's happening. You do a ping local host like we learned about this semester, doesn't work, fails, then didn't install it correctly. And that's a common mistake for new people installing a NIC card. It happens. But because you're afraid you're going to push it down too hard. And that's definitely warranted, right? Because you can push it down too hard and break the NIC card, which again, I've done. Okay, you can do it. So you don't want to push it down too hard, but just like last week when you're crimping the cables, you want to crimp it with a good firm grip. But if you're like me, you have vice grip hands, you can really grip it a little too hard. And I think we had that happen. And I've done it myself. And so same thing with this, just kind of a stern rock slot down into the motherboard. But reading on about expansion cards, the device connects to the computer's main circuit board and bus. And what I really am irritated by is, did you guys hear the Radio Shack's closing down? Radio Shack is one of the few places, you can still buy these online, where you can actually still buy boards and circuitry to build your own, basically your own motherboard and circuitry, your own, if you wanted to. It should give you kits and everything how to learn how to do it for kids of any age and adults of any age, and they're shutting that down. But anyway, I digress. But, I'm kind of bummed by that because they have a lot of cool stuff for not just young people, but even, old guys like me, or older guys like me. Go out and learn some new stuff and put some stuff together. You can still buy all that stuff on Newegg, but kind of saddened about Radio Shack shutting down. Because that's the only place I go to around Rockford if I ever needed any unique circuitries or hardware or whatever. They usually always had it, and somewhere in the back somewhere. But it's kind of like CompUSA when they died around here and went all the way. You still, by the way, there still is a CompUSA in Schaumburg. Yeah.
CompUSA, at least the stores in the Chicagoland area, were purchased by Tiger Direct, and now they're TigerDirect.com stores.
Yes, they are.
Otherwise, you got Fry's.
Yep. And the one in Schaumburg is not too bad. Even though they were bought by Tiger Direct, the same guys that worked there before are still working there, and that's what I liked. Or, dealing with the guys that work there, basically. Yeah.
Doesn't Schaumburg also have like the only for your entertainment as well?
Yes, they do. Yep, you're right. Yeah, and the CompUSA store here, most of the employees that wanted to actually got hired at the one in Schaumburg. And there was some RVC students that have been there for years, managers and stuff. But anyway, Radio Shack's gone, CompUSA's gone. So all we have left is Best Buy. Oh well. Newegg.com. Anyway, the expansion card falls upon the computer centrally, and it controls the devices of the computer. And basically the devices could be, in this case tonight, network communication, but it could also be video, could be audio, could be a scanner, could be a scanner like you're thinking of, probably a picture scanner. It could also be a scanner like they use in the stores when they scan an item and go across a register. So bus types, PCI Express. The E stands for Express, the most popular. And PCI 32-bit bus, maximum transfer rate 1 gigabit per second, introduced in 2004. and these are the ones that you're going to find in, a lot of computers. Basically, the bus type, again, documentation you can find out. You look inside the PC case, it'll tell you. If more than one expansion slot is on the NIC, is on the motherboard, you can look at the NIC manufacturing on the actual motherboard manufacturing guideline. But generally, you don't have to worry about that. If a NIC card fails in your PC, generally the bus is fine and where it's plugged into is fine on the slot. It's all you have to do basically is take the NIC out, again, read the manufacturer. If it's a 3-com, it's going to be an Express more than likely if it's a newer computer. Most people don't have computers in 2000, data 2000. You might still have some, but if you do, by the way, you can still find NIC cards for those. You can go to Newegg, as we talked about earlier. They still have them. But visually look at it, pick it up, look at it, and see what it is. It'll say it right on the NIC card itself, and you really don't need to go to the manufacturing guidelines to look at that. Peripheral NICs, these are things outside of the computer. Now, when I first started networking years and years and years ago, when I was a graphic designer, I had a laptop, right? And we did not have connectivity when I first got the laptop to Ethernet. We had a serial connection, a serial port connection into the network. Anyway, I remember we had a 3-com. Our first one was a 3-com card, PCMI Express. You'll see a picture of one in a second. It's that first one, that PCMCIA Express. It looked like a credit card size card. It plugged inside a laptop, and then you pushed in the side of it, and it popped out, and then you put in a NIC Cat5 cable inside of that slot, and then you could work on the network. Connect to the network. The other type is a USB to NIC, a USB NIC card, and I've had to use these before when, say, a motherboard slot failed on a motherboard, and I couldn't buy a normal NIC. You can buy a USB NIC, and basically it plugs into your USB. You install software to recognize it, and then at the end of it, it's got a Cat5 plug-in, and it works. I've used those before too. Compact flash, they have a compact flash NIC as well. It's the size of, it's square and small, and punch in the side and pops out to put in a Cat5. And then FireWire as well has a NIC port that used for FireWire, and I've used those on some old Macs. Most peripheral NICs do have to have some installed software for that to work, okay? And it comes with the hardware in a box. It comes with that hardware in a box generally. In today's, it'll be a CD still. It'll be usually on a CD or a DVD. Make sure you keep that information or keep that in a safe place. That way, if, God forbid, your computer crashed, you lost everything, and your hard drive failed, you could, still have that old disk to pull from. And I recommend today's culture to maybe compress and back up that disk and maybe store it online somewhere, because there's enough free space online on a cloud services like Google where you could probably post it up there maybe and have it online as well. That way, if your hard copy failed, you'd have a backup that way. So just so you know, on peripheral NICs like PCMI Express, USB, compact flash, FireWire, they generally need some software to install to work. Here's an example of a USB NIC. Plug it in, install software, and it's got a port for Ethernet, and it works. Onboard NICs. Today's onboard NICs are different than what they used to be years ago. Now, the ones we have are working tonight do not have onboard NICs. Onboard NICs will actually come by default in all factory computers today and laptops, not just laptops, but factory desktops. And basically, a onboard NIC, if you're looking globally over the top of a NIC motherboard, whereas before you'd have a slot, PCMI Express, right, to plug in a NIC. Now you just have, actually not even that big, about like that, on the motherboard, and that's it's soldered into the motherboard, just a little black box, and just large enough for a Cat 5 to plug into, and that is an onboard NIC, and it's soldered in. When they fail, most desktop motherboards, even today, will have a slot for you to use, but some don't, and if they don't, then that's when you're going to have to use either get a new motherboard or get a USB NIC to, external USB NIC that we just looked up. But onboard stuff besides NICs, onboard ports like mouse, keyboards, all your USBs have onboard as well, and they generally are adjacent to the Ethernet on the motherboard. Okay, so you got maybe here a NIC, maybe you have here, here, and here. Might be the other ones, like say for maybe these might be USB, and maybe this might be, I don't know, we'll say this is a FireWire or something like that. So they're all basically onboard NICs, and the reason that manufacturers have went to that route is because it's cheaper. It's cheaper to do it that way. Are they as durable? Probably not, but they're cheaper, and most people only keep computers for what, 2-3 years now anyway, and they get a new one. And so, years ago when they bought PCs in the late 80s, early 90s, you would keep your computers 5, 6, 7 years. Today, the average PC buyer, both business and consumer, keeps on average a year and a half, 2 years, they get a new computer. So they don't need to last long, really. So it's not worth it. So advantages, it saves space, and it does free, in some cases, for more expansion slots. But what I have seen happen with manufacturers is because people aren't keeping computers long enough to use those expansion slots, or they aren't seeing bang for the buck down the road with those expansion slots, they're less and less now on motherboards than what they used to be. Okay, very much so. So here's a motherboard that has a lot of stuff on it. So this motherboard, notice it's got tons of onboard there on the bottom left, I'm sorry. Tons of onboard here. This would be your onboard section here. Notice it's right at the edge of the motherboard. You got your audio, you got your USB Ethernet, maybe you got some FireWire, you got an old serial port here for keyboard. Then on the other side, you got slots here, you got slots here. So this has a lot of room for expansion slots from this motherboard. There are motherboards you can still buy like this, but not in a name brand, like go to Dell, go to Gateway, and this kind of motherboard you're gonna get out of default computer on the shelf at Walmart or shelf at Best Buy. These are motherboards. If you want to get, if you want to go, specialty motherboards, you can go to buy these and build them yourself through Newegg. You can also, go to a lot of like Alienware would be an example. They do upper end computers that are pretty expensive, but you can get a lot of expansion slots on it and a lot of opportunity for growth. Yeah.
I think it's better. You're better off just building your own and going to.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. If you want to do one more beefed up and have more control, I definitely agree. But if a consumer doesn't have time or the expertise to do that, they go to Alienware and get a very nice but expensive computer for gaming. And so, no, I totally agree with what you just said. You're going to get a better bang for your buck and probably a beefier one if you build one yourself. But out of the box, if you don't have the expertise or time, Alienware is perfect for most consumers. I'm talking normal consumers that aren't into networking.
Yeah.
Okay. But
I just had a bad time with Alienware. I built my own for like a good, but the grand cheaper.
Oh, for sure.
I'm just going like.
Oh, I have no doubt.
You also have to remember that you're paying for labor,
Yeah.
paying for time saved, you're also paying
Yeah.
for warranty.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. But the non-geeky people like you and me are going to want to not have time to do that. And so they're going to go to like an Alienware to purchase it. But Alienware is there for a reason. And so that's why they're still out and popular, because they fit a niche in the market. And one of the niches is what we're looking at here, basically, is you do have room for expansion, room for growth. And that's great that you can do that. And most consumers aren't going to want it, but there is a niche, enough niche to where it's a market still. So when you go to install a NIC card, basically, again, read the manufacturing documentation, which do I do that a lot? No. But the book's going to tell you that, right? It's a book. It's going to tell you that. Most people that work in PC repair will tell you they don't do that too often. They really don't. After working with them enough, you don't really need to look at the documentation, okay, if you've worked with them long enough. Not to say you would never have to. I would never say that, but very rare would you have to. So installing it, you gather the tools, and like I said, modern PCs today, you don't really need any tools. Most of the case mods for most PCs today have hand screws to unscrew it, if they even have that. And then, like on the motherboard, for around the NIC card, just a little lever to come up like this, and everything's exposed, and you just take everything out, put everything back in. Some of these are, well, all of these, you do need a screwdriver, I believe, for all of these to take the NIC cards out. But some of these, you can take the case mods off with the hand screw. And I busted out the most expensive screwdrivers, as you can see on the top of these. The worst screwdrivers, I think, ever. And so anyway, but you don't need anything fancy smancy. While we're talking about tools, by the way, if you don't have a basic PC tool set, all right, CompUSA isn't here anymore. Believe it or not, the best place to buy a cheap but good tool set for computers is Walgreens. You can buy a very nice one, and they've got all the tools you'll need for your computer. Down a little computer out there, we're home. Yeah, it's in between light bulbs and probably, I don't know, plunger or something. But anyway, you'll find it there if you search for it. But last semester, they were like about $10. They were on sale time. I think the last time I priced them, it might have been $12.50 or $13. But if you don't already have a PC tool set, which generally you need to have, it's going to have in that tool set, you know, the little small screwdrivers, the flat screwdriver, the Phillips screwdriver, have a little magnetic device to where you can pick up screws you dropped in the PC. You have one of those, a little light, a little pincher to pull stuff out. So, you know, at least that type of stuff you can get all in the tool set at Walgreens and be much cheaper than going to Best Buy. And it'll be more than enough for what you need for today's computers anyway. So basically what you do is, where it says here unplug computer, I generally will unplug it and any peripherals also and networking cable and let it sit there for at least 10 minutes by itself. Don't touch it, let it sit there. Because inside your computer, there's a power supply, and that power supply does build up electrostagnetic, material, basically. And basically, it's the longer you let it set, the more that static energy goes away. The other thing is, you don't want to rub your feet on the floor before you come up to it. Now, the way they made all these case mods, they made them in a way to where the outside of it is made to where if you rub your hands against it before you open it, it'll take any electrostagnetic energy in your hands and transfer it into the case. Okay, and that's a tip 2 for you, is you literally rub your hands on the case and it'll take anything out. You've noticed when you picked up PCs, they have like a little rough texture, you know, on all PCs, regardless if it's expensive or cheap. They generally have a little rough texture on it, and that's what that's for. You will see in some places where they ground themselves. Most PC shops don't do this anymore either. If you know what to do in the safeguards, like I just mentioned, you don't need one. Now, if you're careless and don't want to unplug things long enough and don't want to, you want to shuffle around the floor and whatever, yeah, definitely use a ground strap. But if you do things precautionary enough, you generally don't need a ground strap to do what we're doing tonight. I very rarely have used one over the years, and a lot of PC repair shops, even if you go to Best Buy and watch those guys, the ground strap's sitting on the counter and they never use it. So, but it's there. You open the case mod, however you open it, depending on the case mod. Usually they have some type of either hand screw or Phillips or straight. Generally, it's going to be Phillips or hand screw, one of the two. Or in today's PCs, just a lever you push out and it opens up that slide of the case or something like that. So you look at the slot, you find it. In this case tonight, what we're going to do is in just a second, you will take out the NIC. The first person in your group will take out the NIC, and then you'll put that NIC back in. Then the other 2 people will take it out and put it back in. Whoever the last person is will have to secure the NIC card back in again. Because the first person is going to have a little, take the Phillips screwdriver to take the NIC out, put it back in. Second person, take it out, put it back in. Third person, take it out, put it back in, and then secure it back with the Phillips screw. And generally, most older NIC cards or older systems generally do. You have to, tie it down with a secure screw to put that NIC in. Modern PCs, not so much. Generally, again, just a lever, puts over the top of it, and it's fit in. And if you didn't seat it well, by the way, on the modern ones, it won't snap in perfectly. It's literally perfectly fit for that NIC card. Then after that, you verify everything's connected right. Most modern NIC cards do not have any cables needed to connect. The older ones did. They had maybe a NIC card, have a cable connect to, say, somewhere on a power supply, or maybe somewhere on I've seen them connected even to CD-ROMs and DVD drives before.
Maybe on the motherboard.
Yeah, a lead on the motherboard. I've seen that. But pretty much all the modern ones today don't have those for the most part. Then you replace the cover, turn it on. Tonight we're not going to turn it on, but we are going to replace, the last person will replace the cover. I do have by the way, at the front of the room, an empty shelf here, 3 of them on rollers. You'll put your cases up here when you're done, just so you know. But here is a screenshot of a close-up, anyway, of a properly installed NIC card. And you'll notice the metal tines, as I mentioned here on this beautiful drawing, are not showing on the picture. And they shouldn't. They should hide where they meet the expansion right here. Just where it's seated right here. Right there. And so it should make sure on both sides you check that you can't see the metal tines. Drivers, for the most part, today's computers will have all the drivers needed already, especially if you're just replacing a NIC card. It's already going to have it, and you did it the same model, like if it's a 3-COM to a 3-COM, you're going to be okay. If, say, you do a 3-COM, you had a 3-COM and you install some off the wall, which there are a few out there that you can buy, you might need a driver. And this is what you want to do. Whether you know you have it or don't know you have it, either one doesn't matter. What I generally do is, just to make sure, I will put the CD in the drive, shut the drive before I start this whole process, turn off the computer, unplug it, the whole thing. The CD's in the drive for the driver. Then whenever I install the NIC, plug it in, boot it up, the first thing the computer is going to do on the operating system, if it doesn't already have it, is it's going to search for the driver on the DVD that's on the machine. If it's already installed, it searches for it, finds it, and installs it. Make sense? So it just saves you an extra step by not having it in the drive already. And so that's how I generally do it, is I will generally put the CD or DVD in the drive, shut it, turn off the computer, unplug it, do the whole process of installing it, restart it. And if it does need a driver, it'll look for it first place. By default, Windows will look for the installation disk on the DVD. Now, purchase computer with peripheral drivers installed, generally, yes, that's the case. But if it comes with drivers on the new NIC, which it generally does, I always buy, just for safeguard purposes and save me an extra couple minutes, put it in the drive before you shut it down. Make sense? Saves you a lot of time. Especially if you're doing 30 computers at a time, or 50 computers, or 70, whatever. You get my drift, right? And so if you put that drive in there, it's going to help some time. Then you might have to, you will have to install some drivers. So some default drivers we'll go over tonight that will need to be installed. They are Microsoft drivers that will need to be turned on and things of that nature. Some will be turned on by default already, but it might be some you have to check mark to make sure they're in. To make sure they talk on the network and can share files and all the good stuff. And then the operating system will have at times the NIC driver. A lot of times it will. For main card manufacturers like 3-COM, it's going to have the drivers in the operating system for you already. Drivers not available from operating system. already went over that. And most of the time, again, they're going to come from the manufacturer in the box where you get the when you get the NIC. So how do you verify NIC functionality? Glad you asked. Localhost, remember, pinging localhost is one diagnostic tool that I recommend. And I do that every time I install a NIC. Before I ever check the internet connectivity, I check to ping localhost to make sure I get full replies back, successful. If I don't, something's wrong. Either NIC's pooched, it's not any good, or I've installed it wrong. One of the two. Also, there is visual inspection of the LEDs, which really, I don't think that's a real valid way to do it, because these LEDs and all these manufacturers mean different things. And so you'd have to actually read the documentation to really figure out what the LEDs even mean, which to me doesn't make sense to do. But you could, I guess, do it that way. But the last one really is the most common way network folks and PC repair folks test a NIC installation is from a pinging the local loopback. So pinging localhost or pinging 127.0.0.1, either one will work to determine the health. And it doesn't have to be plugged into your network to do that. You just ping it without being plugged into anything. So here's some modular interfaces as it refers to networking with NICs. One is hot swappable components. These can be changed out without disrupting operations. An example would be in some high-end servers, we'll have these built in, right? So say if a NIC card fails, they'll actually have hot swappable components in the NIC embedded area to where you basically can take the old NIC component out and put a new one in while the server's still running. You don't even have to shut it down. And that's what the term hot swappable means. Hot swappable means you can install whatever it is that's failed without turning the machine off. Popular, you might have heard of, is hot swappable fans in servers. That's a real popular one. But there's also hot swappable hard drives, hard swappable components like NIC cards as well that you can more than likely find on high-end servers. The gigabit interface converter is a modern interface device, uses RJ45 or fiber optic. And then small factor pluggable, these are more, allow more ports per inch because they're kind of like the embedded motherboard ports I talked about. They're very small form factor and used a lot for modular interfaces, particularly for RJ45s and NICs. But here's a large shot of these plug and playable and hot swappable devices. So you probably haven't seen one of these on a PC that you used, I'm guessing. And they're going to be, again, found on usually larger end servers, high-end servers. They call them blade servers sometimes. They're very thin, like about maybe 2 inches high and maybe 33, 34 inches deep. All right, and they'll have these in the back of them. And they put them in what's called baker's racks with screws that kind of hold them in. And when we do the tour at the end of the semester, I'll show you some of those baker's racks. You've seen switches in here. They're kind of the same similar height as switches, right? A little bit longer generally. They don't generally have a DVD drive or a CD drive. Everything's installed with, if you do need a DVD, external DVD drive to plug in. But these are very popular plug and playable, hot swappable interfaces. So when the server's still running, if one fails, you just take it out, like the one on the left is a popular one, and you plug in a new one, and you're back in business. Okay, that is a presentation cycle here. So now you have in front of you a nice little handout. And let's go over this real quick, and then I'm going to let you go at it. I'm not going to stay as long tonight. In this lab, you're going to install and configure NIC on a PC. You're going to do the installation part. You're not going to configure. I do have it on the underline. Take your time, be careful. Don't hesitate to ask for assistance. How many's already installed NICs in here at one point? Okay, cool. That's fine. If you haven't, no big deal. So what you're going to do is I want to go over this first because there's some things we won't be doing in here. If you look at the first part of the top of the paper where it says needed, groups 3 or 4. So we're just going to do whoever's in your row is going to be in your group. That's your group. These are already unplugged. Proper electrostagnetic discharge is this right here, proper. That's what you're doing. Somebody put your hands on there. So you'll figure out who's going to go first. Do proper ESD. Go inside the case mod with your hands. Removing the case mod. We have some tools up here. I'll get some more out, one per case. Install the NIC by the following instructions. You'll read those instructions. Basically, number 1 is already done. 2, you'll have to do. The first person will do. Steps 3, there will be a cover plate adjacent to the slot for your NIC. Some of your will actually have 2 NICs on your machine. On your some of these are servers, some have 2 NICs. You can just pick one of the NICs you want to install. Okay? You don't have to do both. So you guys decide which one you want to do. So basically, remove the cover plate for the NIC. You'll align the NIC, take the NIC out. Part 1 is taking the NIC out. Part 2 I'm on right now. You'll put the NIC in. And make sure on step 5, on putting the NIC in, that you set the NIC into the slot, press down firmly. And like I said earlier, just kind of gently rock it. Make sure you're right over the top of it. It may be necessary to gently rock it from side to side. Make sure it's in the slot securely. The gold contacts at the bottom of the NIC should nearly or completely disappear into the slot. The card should be level and straight. So if you just look at both sides, you're good to go. And every person in your group will do that. Remove and install. The last person in your group will replace the cover, and you will not have to plug in the PC. Step 2, where it says the following tasks to be done not in class. These are things that you would normally do if you were installing it and turning it on, is you would add proper NIC card drivers. So go through and read that in your group, because you're going to be on step 5, which we don't do in class, shutting down computer. Step 6, you'll be answering some quiz questions. But some tips for you here on the quiz questions is if you read the page prior, it will help you. Some of these are fairly easy. Some of them might be a little tricky. Might be a little trick question, maybe, possibly. But if you read the prior page, you should be good to go. And you can work as a group on these questions. And you're not going to turn these in, by the way. But we are going to go over them before we leave. So any questions before you start? Okay, so let me go ahead and get a couple more screwdrivers. I've already got 2 of them out. I need to get 3 more. The 2 that have screwdrivers before you start.
Over here.
Yeah.
Nice big open area.
I like the
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That's why you have
Should have stuck.
Or it's kind of busy.
Just
Just takes over,
Pass one over those guys there. Perfect.
Which one is it? Yeah. This one? Alright.
I'll talk to you after.
Yep. All right, so you guys can figure out as a group here how who's going to go first. Always beneficial for everybody to get up and help the first person and kind of work as a group throughout the whole time.
Team
I
cover.
think the screwdriver's Yeah. You got a little bit bigger screwdriver.
That's, I think our screw is a little.
It's a little strip. You have a bigger screwdriver?